Oops, you got it there. There you go. Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming live from Sun City in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling day as my dog goes running past. We have had a super fantastic, sparkling tune-up Tuesday. Yes! So what did we do tune-up Tuesday? Well, we learned a lot of stuff today. But how was your tune-up Tuesday? What tweaks did you make in your business? What tweaks did you make in your life? Did you do any major overhauls, or did you just make minor adjustments here and there? I got overhauled. Well, not really. But today was day 2 of the course that I'm doing, Intermediate Genealogy and Historical Studies. And we had, I don't know what, there we go. Now it's not, whatever it was is no longer there. Itching my eye. Okay. But today we got to hear more about federal land records. We got to hear more about researching state and local land records. We got to hear about U.S. immigration and naturalization records. And let me tell you, that whole thing is a mess. There were so many laws that came into effect over the years that it was sort of like, they seriously did that? Yeah, and then if you're looking for certain records, well, it depends. It depends if they arrive in the country on this date, before this date, or after this date. Because if they arrive before this date, then their records will be here. And if they arrived after this date, their records will be here. But then that could change. And there was just a lot of stuff to take in on that one. And then at the final segment we had today was newspapers, city directories, and maps. And newspapers is one of my favorite things to go looking at, because you never know what you're going to find. And when you're searching by name, yes, it may come up as an obituary, it may come up as a marriage record, it may come up in something else completely different. And sometimes it won't flag that there's obituaries, but as you go through the list, you see, well, that looks like an obituary, so you go and check it, and yeah, it is, but they didn't flag it as one. But yeah, it was a very informative day today, and they're talking about land patterns, and I thought, hang on, I think Brad's great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather, so his great-grandfather and his second great-grandfather both got patterns for the lands that they were in. So, she's talking about how to go researching that. So I'm sort of like, that website, type that in. Okay, go here. But of course, it's a last name, and I kid you not, 15 different ways to spell this name that I have discovered on different records. Whenever I've been researching this particular branch of the family, there is 15, and I can't even do it with 2 hands. I was going, I'll just put up 2 hands. Yep, no, can't do that. Unless I grow some extra fingers. Like, I've only got 11 here, but we'll see. Why did I just do that? Sorry. Yeah, so there's 15 different ways of spelling the name. And this is all the variations that I have found records for this particular branch of the family under since they moved from Germany to the States. And yes, whenever I go researching this family, I've got to go through, because some sites will do the sound X, which means if you put in one spelling, it will bring up all records that sound similar to that. Other ones, it's like you've got to type it in exact, and that's what we're going to search. I like the sound X ones better, because it means I just type in one form of the word and it brings up a lot. And I just go through and check to see which ones it's missing, and then we'll go search on that one later on. But some sites you got to sit there and it's like, oh my gosh, here we go. And you start typing in the different variations to find the records. And I have been hunting high and low for certain records and stuff. And I happened to find the land records. I was like, yes! Now, how do they spell their name there? Oh, that's one of the spellings that we know, so that's okay. So we found the great-grandfather and the great-great-grandfather's federal records on how they purchased. One was a cash purchase, and what was the other one? I can't remember what the other one was. But one had a homestead, and homestead was 160 acres. And we even learned about the meridian lines and going along from there, and you get to the township, and it's got this number, and just how they broke the grids up to different things, and how you could have, so So you'd have a block, and a quarter of that block was 160 acres, and that was a homestead. And there was all sorts of rules for homesteads, like you had to live on the property for 5 years, you had to make improvements, and before you could purchase the land after the 5 years, you had to prove that you had lived on the land for 5 years and you had made improvements to the land since you've been there, and then you can go ahead and purchase the land. So it was kind of, and then you had to be over a certain age, and you had to be a citizen of the US, and there was all these rules and regulations, and this was back in the early 1800s, and I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, 160 and 960 acres, and then the great grandfather had 40 acres, so he had a quarter of one of those square blocks. So there's a square block that's 160 acres, so you've got 4 square blocks make up the big square. And you could only purchase the one homestead, and then his son purchased 40 acres, which is a quarter of what his dad had purchased at 160. So it was kind of interesting. So I found the patents for that. Didn't find a lot of documentation though, but I did find the patents, and it was amazing. What blew my mind though was that when they were doing certain land purchases, they had to provide certain information. So information they may have had to provide might have been birth certificates. It may have been naturalization certificates where they'd been naturalized, petitions of naturalization, marriage certificates to prove that they were married. If they said they were married, they had to provide the marriage certificates. There was all this documentation that they had to provide, and it's sort of like a gold mine for a genealogist, because then you go in there and here's all this information. And later on, when we learned about naturalization certificates, at petitions to become a citizen, it was sort of like, this is the information they required then from this year onward, we required this information, and then we went back to this information. And it was sort of like all these different time, based on the time that you were applying for a naturalization certificate, as to what information you had to provide, and was actually written on the petition. And on the back was the stamp to say that yes, it was approved, and then you'd get the certificate later on. So it was a very involved process and all of that. But in some of the land purchases, all of that information is held together with the land record, and you can go to the National Archives and actually see all these documentations. And if it's digitized, you'll get to see the first of the packet, and then you can just scroll through the packet. And one of the guys was saying that he ordered a copy of somebody he was researching, and it was like 88 pages of information. That was just a whole bunch of genealogy information in there. So he was able to fill in a lot of gaps on his tree and stuff. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize the records held so much. And then we were looking at state and local land records, and that one went on a little long. That actually one ran over and into our lunch hour. And I had Zeffie. I'm taking Zeffie for a walk each day this week, just to get outside and get some fresh air and clear the head. We went walking this morning. It was below 80 degrees. And it's been a few weeks since we were below 80 degrees when we've gone walking between 6 and 7 in the morning. Most mornings we've been going lately, it's been 90, it's been 88, 89, 90, done a couple of 91s. Yeah, but today it was below 80, but it was humid. It was very humid outside. We actually got woken up by a thunderstorm rolling through at 1 o'clock this morning. And I woke up and I thought, oh, must be close to 5 o'clock, because felt like I'd had a full night's sleep. And Zeffie wasn't next to me, so I'd go to see where she was. In her favorite spot, up on the dashboard, she had opened up the curtain, and she's laying there just watching the thunder and lightning go. Crazy dog. And I looked at the clock, and it was just up, and it was 1 o'clock. So I went back to bed, went back to sleep, and my alarm actually woke me this morning. And I was tired when I first woke up. I was like drained. I'm like, man, I feel like I haven't had any sleep. Yet when I woke up at 1 o'clock, I felt like I'd had a full night's sleep. But then when I went back to bed and woke up, 4 hours later, I felt like I hadn't had any sleep. And I was like, nope, we're awake, we're energized, we're going to get out of bed, we're going to go get our day started, because I've lost a whole hour in my day this week. Because my day, usually I get everything done by 7:30, so then I can get online for the wake-up call at 8 o'clock and all that. Yeah, no, we got to be, our sessions start at 7:30, but they open the rooms at 7 o'clock, so you can network with everybody and that sort of stuff. And so I have basically lost. So we go for our walk, we come back, I change my shirt, my little sparkly shirt on, and then get everything organized, make sure I've got my homework done, check to see if there's anything else I need to check for. We get in there at 7 o'clock when they open the room. We network with whoever's coming into the room at the time. And then we start discussing our homework and questions that we have and all that sort of stuff. So it's a really cool. So I've lost an hour this week, and so I'm like, okay, we can. So there's no lazing about in bed waiting for the second alarm to go off. That first alarm goes off, boom, we're out of it. We're out of bed. It doesn't matter if I am dragging or not. It is get up, get moving, get some water into me, and that's the first thing I do in the morning first thing I consume in the morning is water. And that kind of helps wake me up a little bit. I don't do coffee. But anyway, so we learned about that, and the land records one, state and local records went a little long, and so thankfully we've got it recorded, so I can go back and watch the recording for the last, and it turned out it went on for about half an hour past our time. And I was like, I am so glad, because I was starting to fade, and I knew I needed sustenance. I needed to get outside and get some fresh air. And Zephy was out here waiting. And I also had a package at the mailbox because Amazon didn't deliver it to the RV. They sent it via US Postal Service. So I had to go pick that up as well. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to catch the rest on the recording. Right now, I need to go take care of what I need to take care of. And so we went off and we did that, and had a good lunch break and came back. And then after lunch, we were into US immigration and naturalization records, which was really cool because just recently I've been doing a lot more research on Brad's side of the family in preparation for this week. What records can I go and get into that I can find that I can get questions for and that sort of stuff. And so I'd actually come across some naturalization certificates and that sort of thing for the Brahms side of the family, and so that was really cool to find those. And one of them actually had a picture on it, so like awesome. Because I didn't require a picture till much later, so that was interesting. And then the other interesting thing was hearing that if a couple were married, the husband would apply for naturalization and his wife would automatically be naturalized. But there was no paperwork to show that as far as her being naturalized as well, and the kids. And then later on they decided, no, we're going to scrap that. But what was interesting is that for a few years in around the 1920s, I think it was, that if a U.S. born woman, so she's a U.S. citizen, married an immigrant who was not naturalized, she lost her U.S. citizenship. So like, wait, what? Yeah, crazy, I know. So if a U.S. born woman who was an American citizen married somebody who was not an American citizen, for this short period in time, she lost her U.S. citizenship. I'm like, and then then my question was, well, if the person she married became naturalized, she would then become naturalized because she was married. This is so crazy. And then for a while there too, America was not allowing certain nationalities to come into the country, and this is back in the early part of the 1900s when allowing certain nationalities. And so if a woman married an Asian guy, not only did she lose her U.S. citizenship, he couldn't come into the country because he was Asian, and they had a ban on Asians coming into the country at the time. I'm like, that is so screwed up. It was just wild. And it was crazy. And if an American man had married an Asian woman while overseas, he couldn't bring her back into the country because she was Asian, and they weren't allowing Asians in. I'm like, that is so screwed up. I have no idea where whoever was making these decisions, where their thinking was at the time, but there was just all these little crazy things as far as immigration went and everything else. And, it went from being, you had to pay it. And then they decided, we're going to charge people a tax. It's going to be 50 cents a head, 50 cents a person as you come in. And then they raised it to $2 a person. And then it was $4 a person. And it was $8 a person. And I'm like, seriously, this is like, and I'm like, no wonder I'm having so much trouble finding naturalization records, because I did not realize that if the husband was naturalized, his wife was automatically naturalized. So now I know that when I'm looking for the wife's details, look to see if the husband got naturalized, and then she was automatically naturalized on the same date within a certain time period. So you got to look at the time period. What laws and regulations did they have in place for those coming into the country? Could they come into the country? And if they could come into the country, how long did they have to be there before they were naturalized? And all of there was like so many. It truly was mind-boggling. And then we ended the day with newspapers, city directories, and maps. And I love newspapers. You get some crazy information in there on some of the articles. And most of the time we're using them for marriages and death, obituaries, that sort of stuff. And but other times you'll find, and she says, when you're researching newspapers and you find that before you go looking, when the newspapers come up, her advice was, before you go looking for what it is you're there to look for, go to page 1, check out what was happening in the world at that point in time. What type of publication is it? Is it a local one? Is it a national one? Is it a statewide one? Is it a town one? Is it an association? There was all these different types of newspapers. But what was interesting, it was like, she had this chart that she would just click onto the next date, and it showed the spread of publications across the US. And there was one time in I think it was the 1970s, the number of newspapers being circulated at the time, the number of different types of newspapers that were out there, so newspaper companies, whatever, media outlets for just distributing newspapers, was like 16,000, and then it dropped down to 13,000. And that was, like in the 1970s, it was the highest point of newspapers that the US has ever had, was in like the 1970s. It might have been the 1960s. I'll have to go back and have a look through my notes. But it was interesting watching this trend go up, and you see these dots move across to as newspaper outlets spread across, and then she was you're watching the number at the top as it dropped, and then it went up, and then it started going up, and then it gets to this high point, and it was like the 1960s, 1970s, and then it started dropping off after that, and I was like, that's crazy. But yeah, I love newspapers. I love going in and reading some of the articles, and a lot of the times where the marriage and the marriage notices and the obituaries are, or even the engagement notices, are very interesting, because they have like, Joan Smith was admitted today into hospital with a broken arm. And then you'll read a few days later that Joan Smith is still in hospital with her broken arm, and she's expected to be released home to her address, and they'll put the address there tomorrow, or she goes released to go home today to such and such an address, and like all your information was there. So if you wanted to keep it private that you were in hospital, I don't know what you had to do to keep it out of the paper, but otherwise the paper reported these are the people that were admitted. This is how those that are staying in hospital are doing, and then, oh look, they're going home today, and here's their home address. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then there'll be newspapers about afternoon teas that were had, or luncheons, or dinners and galas, but the thing was that back in the 40s, the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s, and even in the 20s, it was Mrs. whatever the last name was. It was, and very rarely did it have their first name in there, and so we just Mrs. Smith or Mrs. John Smith. And I was like, well, which John Smith were you married to, and what was your first name? And so yeah, there was all this sort of stuff in this. There's a cloud of mystery about some women that are mentioned in newspapers, because it's Mrs. husband's first name most of the time, and then the husband's last name. So you could be Mrs. John Smith, or you could be Mrs. J. Smith, or you could be Mrs. Smith. And that was how it was back then. So it was very interesting to to read there. But some of the birth announcements that would be in the papers as well would be Mr. and Mrs. John Smith had a beautiful baby boy, and may have in parentheses Nee, N-E-E, whatever the wife's maiden name was. And, had a bouncing baby boy, and, they'd make the whole announcement thing in there and that sort of stuff. So, and then city directories, helping to find migration paths. You can use city directories if you've got two people of the same name around the same area. You can utilize the information in the city directories to help create a chart so you can see which one's which. And we did a very good one with one who sold shoes and one that had a shoe store, but their first names and their last names were basically the same. And so I was trying to decipher which was which, and that sort of thing too. So that was kind of cool. And then maps, we got to look at we got a brief overview of the different types of maps, from panorama maps to battle maps used in the military. We get to hear more about those tomorrow. We get a whole afternoon of military stuff, which I can't wait, because I love the military stuff. They have really cool records. This whole week has been, the last 2 days has been really cool, because I look at it and go, oh, religious records. That'll be interesting, because I often have problems with religious records, and now I know why, because there was over 900 different denominations. And I'm like, well, that will explain a lot of that. And then doing advanced census research and digging a little deeper into the census reports instead of just giving it the cursory glance, and making sure that you check all the neighbor, who are the neighbors. Remember my story with my third great-grandfather. That's how I found out that my fourth great-grandfather was no longer in the picture, because my third great-grandmother had married the guy next door, and I figured out, well, where did he come from? And I went back to the 1851 census, and there he was listed as the next door neighbor. So you never know. When you're looking at different census reports and stuff, you could be looking at one, and there is your great grandparent or your great great grandparent living in their house, and across the street or down the street could be their future spouse that you find later on, and look, they were in the same state. They grew up together. They knew each other, type of thing. But yeah, so it was a really, really good day. And then I went to the networking thing that they had afterwards, and partway through that, my brother-in-law called. And so we had a good catch-up conversation and everything else. And I mentioned to him, I says, one of the things we've got access to is this relative finder thing. And it says that your mom is like the 9th great-granddaughter of one of the guys that came over on the Mayflower. And I said, but, that hasn't been proven. There's still, I've only verified back to a certain point, and there's still stuff to think. And then he says, yeah. He said, I remember Mum talking about that. She thought that we were related to somebody on the Mayflower. So I'm sort of like, that is so cool. So that's actually confirmation from the family that there was a family rumor that they were related to somebody on the Mayflower. And then this thing pops up stating that, this guy was her 9th great-grandfather. So now I'm going to be researching that even more to make it more of a solid connection. And land records came into it. So like, I just learned all about these today. Oh, look, I can even follow the map and tell you where it is, and with all the reference points, because we learned how to go along this meridian here, and I can't remember the up and down. I think the up and down one was a meridian as well. But you go to this one here, you go along, and there's the town number, there's the yeah, I got it all. They can put all the abbreviations down there, and I can go to a map and find it now. But what was really cool was the fact that stuff I had learned today, I've already put into practice with looking more into this Mayflower line. And so that was kind of exciting and everything else. But it was good catching up with my brother-in-law. I haven't spoken to him for a bit, but had a really good catch-up conversation with them. And looking forward to seeing them when I go out to California, September or October. I just haven't decided when yet. I do have a class coming up in September. Actually, I think I have 2 classes coming up. I think I have like a 3-day conference and a 5-day conference, and they're back-to-back weeks. So one's a 5-day, then the next week it's like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Or was it Thursday, Friday, Saturday? Can't remember. So it may be October. And October would be a nice time to travel through. We're past all the crazy weather at that point. Yeah. But anyway, time for me to head off. Got manuscripts and military tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to that. And for some reason, my Wi-Fi is not playing nice. I'm getting jiggery pictures, so I hope that records fine for you guys and that it looks okay. But anyway, I'm out of here. I'm going to go make my charcuterie board for dinner. So go have a soup, and then I've got to get Zeffy her TREATs. So have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow for Winning Wednesday. Hey, Conetta.